Hello and welcome to another iceberg video. Today we are going to cover the best of Monstercat in 2025. Honestly, of the 3 years I've reviewed, this year was probably my favorite one thus far, or at least the one that I have the softest spot for when it comes to the best stuff. I know I make a lot of comparisons between this label and NCS, I don't see that stopping anytime soon, but there's a part of me that feels like they swapped places from last year. In 2024, NCS took advantage of Monstercat's rhythm influx with their 13th anniversary and a Geometry Dash collaboration. But this year, NCS found their rock bottom, and Monstercat conveniently found some of their best form in a while. Only makes it even more poetic that it happened from August onward. But I understand the counter-arguments. Even I wasn't expecting this year to be anything special, given how long it took to really get going. It was a bad year for albums and more of a hit-or-miss year for EPs. And when you review any label for a couple of years up to this point, you can understand your favorites, your main eventers, the artists expected to contend for your best list about every year, and some of them didn't even show up apart from a remix or alias change. In fact, none of the artists who made my list proper in 2024 are making my list proper in 2025. Instead, if there's one thing that stands out the most about 2025, it's that I think it was a truly great year for returns and debuts. Whether or not it represents a new generation of Monstercat, it ultimately depends on who sticks around. So the best list proper will be one track per artist to make things fair, and it will be Uncaged and Instinct originals only, which means no Undertale or Stealing Fire remixes. I think part of the reason why some songs really stuck around for me is because of hearing some acts outside of the label and understanding and often enjoying their styles further. So with that, let's get underway with our honorable mentions. All Night by Retrovision and Guy Arthur. It was about time for Guy Arthur to get a Monstercat debut, and this collaboration makes too much sense. A lot of bounce and energy in the production makes it stand out, although I will say I prefer the first drop much more than the second. Breakthrough by Sublab. It's a cleanly produced mix between trap and future bass that relies on a quick and punchy lead sound, and it carries a lot of liveliness all over the production to make for one of many great first impressions. Circles by Coven. Although I didn't really care for Coven's album, this was the best song from it. The piano-based concept works so well with liquid drum and bass here. Feels So Good by Frankie Nuts and Uke. An earworm of a release that I had to revisit to realize it's pure nostalgia as well. Carries a driven future-based sound along with strong trap percussion, and it works well for live sets and for casual listens. Fly by Sport Mode. The hard techno drop makes for a really nice switch up to start, and the elements are well structured in the trap drop to add some extra dimension to this debut. I See by Codeco. Codeco is one of those artists that I enjoyed listening to even before arriving to this label, but going for trance here was kind of unexpected. The ARP is great and the overall production can carry both energy and emotion. Shine by Higo. Like Boss Fight's Ballistic last year, even if most of the production is good by itself, some details within can absolutely carry a song. Although I'm not fully sold on how the vocal chops are used here, the lead synth in the part afterward is just so cute. Tonight by Bishu. Probably one of the most euphoric drops I've heard from Bishu yet. The chimes are amazing, and it's just downright fun to listen to, although parts elsewhere are a bit too much of a mixed bag to make the list proper. Blood in the Water by Protostar, Laminar, and I'm Alright. Simply put, this is one of those songs that absolutely deserves the acclaim it gets. I'm Alright's vocal meshes very well with the production. Oathbreaker by Castor. Trap has had some moments within its influx, and here the off drops are pretty excellent with an imposing use of melody and sound selection, and the drops are just as vicious. Shangri-La by Exod. Exod has had a pretty interesting year, especially with his drum and bass alias. But this time around, he goes for a fast-paced sort of progressive house that makes for a fun listen and a brand of house not often seen on this label. Enemies by Yussi and OK. This one snuck into my honorable mentions. The production throughout is very solid, but it's the bright synths that really carry this song for me. Obvious by Cascade. Another case of being the strongest production of the album. The drops are full in their mixing and grand and sweeping in the overall concept. Breathe by Bad Computer. Of course, this is the one song from Bad Computer that doesn't make Monstercat's best of 2025. While I mostly respect the groove of Connected and the villain arc of Undefined, this song leans to his more melodic side that has put him on the list proper before. Future by Teddy Killers. You know what? This year has actually been pretty good for Neurofunk on this label. Through this song and their Cooked album, which I wasn't a fan of, I was able to figure out what works for them. This one's led by a fun melody and an action-packed tone from the production. Hyperstrike by Lizdek and Atora. What a hidden gem this double debut was. With Bass House often going the aggressive route, this one is a little more sneaky. With the first drop giving off vibes similar to Fred again, and the last drop reminding me of vintage Afrojack. Maniac was also a contender for Lizdek, and much like Higo, I have absolutely loved listening to Atora off the label. Hyperfocus by Oblivion. The color-based elements add a lot of detail to the song, and the chord progression adds to the amount of stuff to unpack. It was close to making my list proper, but it just left me wanting more. I really hope Oblivion sticks around. Make Believe by Chill. I didn't love Chill's EP this year, but I really like the flow of this song. The fake out for the first drop is fantastic, and the rest of that drop is pretty emphatic. Surge by Keizo. This brand of hard techno is just right up my alley. The drops are vicious, and the melody and sound selection in the break is great. Although it's a bit too much of a one-trick pony to make my top 10, I think, like Oblivion, something special could be on the cards for Keizo next year. And finally, Damage by Virtual Riot and Diesel. Without a doubt, the best song from MDE. The Neurofunk production is tactical and makes the most out of a highly anticipated collaboration. Plus, it's the most I've enjoyed Diesel as a rapper. Maybe it's a sign that he flows better for drum and bass than he does for dubstep. And with all of that out of the way, let's talk about the top 10 best Monstercat songs of 2025. Number 10. If you told me back in 2023 that a Neurofunk song would make my best list proper, I probably would have called you insane. At first, I put this genre on a similar tier to Rhythm, mainly because of how awful the worst of the genre was. And I still think that this year's worst off the label was awful. So it's really surprising that one of these songs made this list. Not as much of a surprise once you find out who made it. Yep, this is how the list starts. For those who don't know, Purpose actually topped my best list on NCS back in 2023. Their collaboration with Andromedic was where I finally understood what works so amazingly well for dance floor drum and bass. And for their debut here, they team up with Arcando, who's been fairly interesting on the label, but is more well known with some off-label stuff, including multiple involvements on Martin Garrix's Stamped label and even a song with Garrix himself. Now within Neurofunk, there are some songs that live and die by the call and response. And I'm reminded of what clicked so well from John's What at the start of 2024, where the elements alternate with each other to provide the main structure. Ultrasound makes that structure very clear throughout. A playful tone in the break leading to a very cohesive and energetic drop. The call is a simple and punchy melody that builds up to the response where the drop really gets going. The screech meshes well with the rest of the production, making for a fun listen that isn't overly frantic or abrasive. They're given their space and time for the most part. I think I prefer the first drop to the second, where the main thing that changes there is that the screeches are an octave higher. Another thing that I think is fairly common in Neurofunk. But overall, it's a great and well-earned debut for Puripus, and it also shows what Arcando is capable of. Number 9. Yeah, okay, this was an obvious pick. I think some people might be surprised that I have it this low, but it felt like it had to make this list. It wasn't the best year for Tokyo Machine. At least, it wasn't a good start to the year. There was not a single notable song from his Factory Reset EP, and even the songs that didn't feel like they joined a bandwagon were still clunky in production on its own. So how do you redeem yourself from that? Well, why not bring along the return of Temanite and the debut of Boom Kitty? This song was always at least going to contend for the top spot on Monstercat's Best of 2025, and no surprise it got it. Energy and hype is the name of the game here, and it starts from the word go. The metal guitars set the scene as the arena claps and percussion chime in to help light said scene on fire. And the break as a whole has this sort of arena-based atmosphere, especially as it builds up. The first drop combines the riff of the guitars with some electro house growls and Toki's metallic production, which all rattles across each other well, where Temanite and Boom Kitty can add details through the timing and spacing of various elements. The second part of the song provides an electric guitar solo, which is used in that second drop too. And while it maintains its energy well, it's probably the main reason why this is lower on my list. I think there were better choices on how to use that time. But even then, it's a great moment for all three artists involved, and it deserves all the acclaim it got. Number 8. And just like Busted, this song doesn't need a lengthy introduction, so it's not going to get one. I have been waiting for the right moment to talk about Haywire. Even though White Lie wasn't really anything special for me, Chromatically was one of the last cuts to my honorable mentions last year. It's fitting that he makes my list with another return in kind. One of the most highly anticipated collaborations, maybe of Monstercat's recent memory, and it had a lot worth revisiting. It opens with a chill trap production where the synths can carry the setting, and as it approaches the build-up, it goes with a sweet melody carried by a solid lead and some even brighter sounds on occasion. In my opinion, I think the off drops are better than the drops, although the drops are still pretty solid on their own, as they can provide a sharper production and sound selection. And I like how it flows with the vocoder and some fills throughout. The second break is what stands out most, not only letting the pre-drop melody return, but also having space to show what Haywire does best with the synth solo. And the second drop utilizes some harmonies to add on to the production. Again, despite the acclaim, it's a little lower on my list, because I don't think the drops have the grand bombastic swell they deserve, and I feel like it only fits for a casual listen. Regardless, it's still a great track from Haywire and a massive welcome back for Bracken. Number 7. So now we enter into more uncharted and probably more contentious territory with the next 4, maybe 5. And these next 4 were not easy to order. Every one of them stood out in various ways over the course of the year. And it starts with a different kind of return. Not one exactly on artist alone, but more so in terms of form. When it comes to being experimental, not every risk is going to pay off. And for an artist who was amazing in 2023, and not as much in 2024, this song shows that sometimes it's better to stick to your roots. I think a lot of Chime's stuff back in 2024 and even the early part of 2025 was more hit or miss than it was before. It was a very experimental side of Chime that often lacked a strong gusto, storyline, or even replayability. Pyroclastic had an excellent theming, but the drops themselves weren't anything special. The double single on the Disciple label relied on the micro-drop concept, which was solid but felt like an oxymoron on its own. And I especially wasn't a fan of Liminal or Duckstep. Upon his return to the label, this was pretty much exactly what I wanted him to make. The storytelling is shown in the break to add some dimension, the drops are emphatic, and the style that made his 2023 so special is utilized very well here. The color base provides that necessary gusto to add to the storytelling, before transitioning onto a tear-out drop with a similar pattern, and you know what? Tear-out as a whole has grown on me this year. More so off the label than on it, case in point Sullivan King, somehow. But this is an example of what works within Tear-Out and how high that ceiling can be, especially for live set material. And let's not forget about the second drop, faking out the style of the first drop before building up to something melodic and spacey. I love the chord progression in particular. It's able to add on to the atmosphere even further and act as a moment of release. I'm very excited to see where Chime goes from here. Will he chase the experiments or stick with the proven formula? Number 6. This one is probably the toughest one to introduce, mainly because it's a first impression. An artist I knew nothing about heading into this debut, and it was with an EP as well. I don't know how often that's happened before. Within any first impression, obviously you would hope that something would stick around. And here, not only did one of these songs stick around, but it stuck deep against all the odds. The point of view from the From a Certain Point of View EP was not one that I revisited a whole lot apart from this song. The intro takes its time where, outside of the vocal hum, the varied sequence has a lot to offer, especially around the echoing arp. The sound selection for both drum patterns is pretty unique as well. And with the vocal sample, it's one that I've heard multiple times before, but it's used well in the context of the production. The first future bass drop is so cute. I love the Bit Crush vocal chops and how they sit in with the rest of the mix. And I also really like how the bass hops around, sometimes with different octaves. And then we have a tempo switch up onto drum step, with a stronger and cleaner melody alternating with some secondary elements, some of which taken from the first drop, especially around the bass line. It adds more dimension and more nostalgia to the track. And the last drum and bass drop works very well for a closer. This is one of those songs where a lot of the details make it worth revisiting every time. That "Are We Dreaming" whisper is such a small touch, and it sometimes gets me emotional and I don't know why. And some other elements, like the vocal chops in the last drop, perhaps don't even deserve to work as well as they do. A perspective that sought well and found very memorable success. Number 5. But going back to the topic of returns, this was an artist that had some special moments off the label last year and got himself a well-earned return here. But he's not here with the song he returns with, but rather the song that can highlight those moments. So, my favorite EDM song in all of 2024 was All That Ends by Trivecta and Sam Welch. A grandiose progressive house song that's one of the fullest and most emotional ones I've heard yet, where it doesn't rely on a traditional lead melody, but rather a stormy, clustered, and yet dramatic wall of sound and a long-lasting drop. In terms of Monstercat, Trivecta returned with Arise, a song that felt like it was mostly Blastoise, and while the psytrance was great, it was the melodic dubstep drop that ultimately costed a spot here. This song leads more towards an electro-pop-esque brand of stutter house, but it takes in a lot of what makes All That Ends special through the sound selection and structure. It starts with Vanru's vocals over a break carried by the acoustic guitar, where the hook is then accompanied by some orchestral drums as it progresses. And while it's fairly simple, there's one detail throughout the song that I especially love: the echoing slides. They give the song an unexpected countryside sort of feel, as they did at times for All That Ends. And those concepts are used so well in the stutter house drops too, alongside the echoing vocals. It's not the most complicated song on this list, but it's one of the more comfortable ones. One that can do more and reference the most, even with less. Number 4. No genre had a relatively worse run of form on the label as a whole than dubstep. With almost every other genre finding significant or unexpected highs, the rhythm influx along with subsequent influxes really plagued this genre in recent years. But I'll be real, the heavy side of dubstep has never been a go-to for me. It can be an interesting one to explore, and some parts of it have much more to offer than others. But this song is a difficult one to unpack in the best possible way. Even with Affinity landing this high on my list, I think it was actually just as good, if not better outside of the label. He was close to making my honorable mentions with his melodic side in 2023, and that melodic side led to some amazing songs off-label this year, like his remix of Dabin's Photographs and his collaboration with William Black. But on the label, yeah, no, it's a different story. It initially started with a short and mostly overlooked trap EP before really grabbing my attention in the tail end of A Bad Month, with a song that feels like a hidden gem. A brand of brostep that took some time to realize this is Pixel Terror all over again. There is a lot to offer in the build-ups, the art provides a lot of energy, and the scarce vocal samples have some chemistry within. And this is one of those songs where no two drops are the same, and there is a lot of detail and aggressive charm within each one. The first drop starts with a double fake before a vicious brostep rumble combines with some high-pitched yet still composed sustains, alternating with and making the most out of its pre-drop melody. The second drop is probably my favorite of the three, utilizing a back and forth between two different and more fast-paced styles. I especially like how the percussion alternates within. And the last drop caps it off with a phaser in the fake out and its most intense sustains yet. It's that overall attention to detail that makes the song special. Safe to say it was an amazing year for Affinity, and he has a lot of options heading into 2026. Let's hope he can make the most of it. Number 3. So this one is a lot simpler. This artist was one of my favorite arrivals from 2023, and while I'm a little surprised this song remains so high, it's an indicator that he absolutely deserves more of a push moving forward. Yes, Future House doing what Future House does best. This was another artist that didn't have an excellent 2024 on the label, but went back to his best run of form here and made it look easy. One thing that Retrovision does very well is pushing a brand of cheerful, carefree, and downright lively house music. Mostly for the sake of epic live sets, although it works for casual listens too. The bright synth carries the opening break, pushed further by an occasional phaser. And in the first drop, the vocal sample goes in a back and forth with a pulsing lead melody. The structure around it carries a lot of bounce, and the post-drop brings back elements from the break to add on to its driven energy. I like how the cutoffs can add some extra emphasis to the production here. And the second drop starts with a bass growl before knocking over to some phasing synths, and it feels like borderline Color House. Definitely felt the love on this one. He's been one of my favorite Monstercat artists, both on and off the label, and it's great to see him back to his best again. Number 2. I want to make it very clear that not every long-awaited return is going to stand out for me. I try to take every song at face value, and most of the returns from years prior, even if they were good, they often weren't anything special. It felt like only a matter of time for Haywire to make my list proper, given all the acclaim that his return had back in 2023, and yet I think I prefer Justin Gent's return more. And speaking of 2023, Topi and Dactyl made my worst list that year. But while most of this year's returns hit different and came from artists I knew more about, in my time reviewing this label, I don't think any return has ever clicked as well as this. Ever since I found out that Rogue was returning to the label, this was a song that I highly anticipated. And given that he was mostly future-bass oriented when he was on the label back in 2022, an instinct return made, well, perfect sense. And speaking thereof, future bass as a whole has quietly had a great year on the label, given songs like Can't Sleep, Feel So Good, and I could put Sublab's double single in that conversation as well. And for this song, the break opens in a simple manner. Alongside Rogue's vocals and his down-to-earth lyrical content, the piano, guitars, and vocal echoes in the background could do well enough to introduce the song. The ambience in the hook carries a lot of atmosphere, and the vocoder adds on to the vocal dimension here. And as it builds, there's a swell in the strings that adds more emotion and tension. And the bright synth sustain in the drop is amazing. It's one chord at first to add to the dramatic flair, but as it plays out, the chord progression gets clearer. I love the triplet fills and how the bass maneuvers around on occasion. And the second drop I think I like even more, where it's a house-oriented switch-up that feels like a near-perfect culmination to the song. And it highlights what a lot of returns were missing for me. The anticipation for it is one thing, but this return can stand on its own, regardless of expectation. The best recent comparison I have isn't even on Monstercat. It's Faster by Tobu on NCS, a song that I think I should have put even higher then. But while this was the best return we had this year, there was one other song that stood out more. Now before I reveal my number one spot, I'd like to take a moment to advertise my other channels. You can check out my gaming content through Iceberg Gaming, along with my own productions and mixes through Iceberg Music. I have a couple of sub goals that I'd like to hit throughout all three channels, so I'd appreciate it if you help out with that. Also, I'd love to make some community ranking videos where you guys can rank some of my favorite music outside of the label. Just let me know in the comments if you're interested. But with all of that out of the way, this might be one of my favorite songs to talk about yet. Number 1. Although it was the track to beat at the time, it was only more deserving of this spot as the year progressed. Led by an artist who made my top 3 multiple times before, but never the number 1 spot until now. And this song has proven not really that Roy Knox was back, he never left. I'm almost lost for words as to where to begin here. You've got Roy Knox leading the charge, along with the debut of Sad Boys and the return of Francis Durrell under a new alias after X Heaven. I guess to start, with Roy Knox last year, Ghost in the Shadows was another one of my last cuts to the honorable mentions, and Hideaway with Have was a great switch up from his usual style. I may have said this before, but the two styles that work best for Roy Knox are his color-based production, like the aforementioned Ghost in the Shadows and About You, and his emphatic melodic dubstep in songs like this. With Sad Boys, they started building up notice in 2024 on NCS with their rocktronic style. They found a way to make the most out of it with huge collaborations of their own. It mostly took their off-label stuff to really win me over and build momentum heading into their debut here, especially given who it's with. With the lyricism, it's been a bit more of a mixed bag for Sad Boys in particular, especially on NCS, but the main story of the lyricism in this song is very clear. Where Noah Kinane, the featured vocalist, basically says, "I don't want you to be kind, I want you to be honest." He wants to know exactly what's a fix and what's complicating the relationship more than anything. The production adds on to the emotion and honesty and shows the chemistry between everyone involved. The break provides the rocktronic influence where Noah tells his story. And with the drops, the first one I heard ahead of time, and it's where Roy Knox can take charge of the emphatic production. The lead sound is awesome, and the ambience can fill up the rest of the space. I thought it would make my list anyway if the rest of the song was the same, but then the BPM starts to speed up, going from dubstep to drum and bass, and it's incredible. The vocal chops along with the synths in the background add a completely different dimension to the song that just astounds me. The halftime drum step as the song ends winds up being the ultimate catharsis that caps it off. And turns out, that may have been where Francis Durrell was most involved. The moment I found out that After X Heaven was more of a drum and bass oriented alias, that's when all the pieces fit. It's the elements you don't know that can make or break a song. But how often is it when a song I already had high anticipation for can find a way to exceed expectations further than I ever thought? All of that is why Say What You Mean by Roy Knox, Sad Boys, After X Heaven, and Noah Kinane is the best Monstercat song of 2025. And that'll wrap up this list. Let me know of your favorites in the comments below. And if you guys enjoyed, feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And I'll talk to you in the next video.